think if you support monetarily people who are begging on the street, you run the risk that they will spend their money on the less desirable recreational drugs and therefore encourage their addiction and delay the possibility of them being able to get control of their lives again.
Which a lot of people also know, don't they, but still have sympathy when they give. That's the thing.
Absolutely, they do. And maybe the giving is to give them or to offer them food, which they may reject, or to offer them the advice of coming to agencies like ours who will work with them in terms of offering them accommodation in our night shelter, food from our food bank, and counselling from our AOD services.
So does a multi-agency, I know cities like Melbourne are talked up as, because the police used to take the begging bowls off them in Melbourne, but I know that I noticed they've been talked up as having a nice multi-agency approach now to dealing with beggars, which is what they're trying for in Christchurch. But I'm inferring from what you say that a multi-agency approach never really fully solves the problem.
Well, it won't cover everybody. I mean, people are free to lead the life they want to. And that does bring with it consequences. I mean, I'd hate it if I were Ballantynes and had to put up with people. It's all very well to say Christchurch is a bit of a mess, but it's more important than that. We're dealing with people's lives. And I would hope that we can encourage them to seek help that is available. But these people are choosing, if the press report is to be believed, they're choosing to lead the sort of lifestyle to support their drug and alcohol habits.
Sure. Is there much homelessness on the streets of Christchurch? Because you would also know that.
Yeah, there is certainly homelessness there, and there is a lot of hidden homelessness too. And I think one of your panel members suggested that the stats are really hard to get. But yeah, there are certainly people who are homeless. They perhaps are not so obvious in their homelessness, and we would hope that they would seek help that is available.
Indeed. And thank you for joining us, for being available for us. Michael Gorman on the panel. Not time for much before we go, but I can ask you about some speculation today that America is considering sending a ship to mark the Royal New Zealand Navy's 75th anniversary in November. Happy to welcome back our beloved ANZ's allies, Duncan.
I mean, I don't really have a strong opinion about that. To be honest, I think there was when we sort of turned them away in the 80s, it was obviously kind of a signal moment in our kind of nationhood. And if at this point, with the way that our sort of bilateral relations have evolved, we can see something and bring them back, so be it.
Raven.
Well, I guess it depends how obviously nuclear it looks. That would be, if it's an aircraft carrier and, Tom Cruise shows up with it, that's one thing. But if it's sort of a friendly sort of tugboat and, Captain Stubing from the Love Boat shows up, it's a bit different.
The Geiger counter criteria. Raven Can, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Duncan Grieve, you too. And that's the panel, everybody, and Checkpoint follows.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell on behalf of the Checkpoint team. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, the Panama Papers, New Zealand, what the PM says, what his opponents say, and what the people make of it. We have extensive coverage of today's events. If you're stuck in appalling traffic on Auckland's Southern Motorway, we're going to explain why and how long it will last. We're back in Canada where the fire is bigger and badder, but not as bad as it might have been. Dunedin doctors consider legal action over the quality of hospital food, and just how nasty is the US presidential campaign going to get? We are there, all of that and more in the next 90 minutes. But first, of course, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The Prime Minister concedes there may be rogue operators working within the New Zealand foreign trust sector, but he still insists the country's broader regime is robust and legitimate. The Panama Papers have highlighted the ease of setting up secretive foreign trusts in New Zealand and show the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca helped many people, including Colombian car dealers and Mexican celebrities, to park their money here. At his post-cabinet news conference a short time ago, Mr Key front-footed the Panama Papers topic, saying it was utterly incorrect to call New Zealand a tax haven.
There's a very thorough process you have to go through. If you're a trust company that establishes one of these foreign trusts, of which there are a number in New Zealand, you are subject to the anti-money laundering rules. That means, not the least of them, you have to actually know your client and know the source of funds. And there are very strong legal obligations on people that do that.
John Key. The investigation into New Zealand links in the Panama Papers is a journalistic collaboration by reporters from RNZ News, One News and investigative journalist Nikki Hager, and with the association of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung. The Ngāpuhi leader Sonny Tau has pleaded guilty to conspiring to pervert the course of justice. Tau was caught with 5 dead keridu by Department of Conservation staff at Invercargill Airport last June. He's previously pleaded guilty to having the protected birds, but his son-in-law Douglas Sadlier tried to take the blame for the hunting, and both were charged with perverting the course of justice. Today in the Invercargill District Court, Tau was indicatively sentenced to 3 months community detention and 100 hours community work and fined $24,500. He'll be sentenced in June. The Australian Stock Exchange has halted the trading of shares in the major media company APN News and Media. There's been speculation APN is considering merging its New Zealand assets with those of its main rival, Fairfax. Eric Frickberg reports.
In a statement, APN says the halt will last until trading starts on Wednesday or until it makes another statement. No other details are available in accordance with usual share market secrecy. A merger of the two media rivals would bring major newspapers such as the New Zealand Herald, the Dominion Post and the Christchurch Press under one umbrella, along with the News Talk ZB radio network. But Fairfax has cast some doubt on this, telling the Australian Exchange that while it's aware of media speculation, at this stage it has nothing to disclose. This is Eric Frickberg.
The association representing junior doctors at Dunedin Hospital says it has the legal right to force the Southern District Health Board to change its meal supply contract. The Resident Doctors Association says the board did not consult it about switching to Compass. The association's National Secretary, Deborah Powell, says it believes the quality of the food has changed substantially. A recent survey of junior doctors at Dunedin Hospital found 90% believe the quality had worsened since Compass took over. Providers of home support services say $50 million has been sucked out of their work in the past decade by smaller increases in health funding. At a health summit organised by the Labour Party at Parliament today, the Chief Executive of the Home and Community Health Association, Julie Haggie, said the 108,000 people the association tries to support are generally more unstable than rest home residents. She says adequate funding is needed to assist them.
But instead, we're seeing a scouring out. Every time the minimum wage is not funded, which it has not been for the last 8 years, it takes $7 million out of our sector. There's $50 million over since 2006, 2007 has been sucked out.
Julie Haggie of the Home and Community Health Association. All lanes on Auckland's southern motorway are open again after 2 southbound lanes had to be closed this afternoon when a digger hit the Penrose overbridge. The St Mark's, Ellerslie and Green Lane off-ramps southbound were closed to reduce the volume of traffic coming onto the motorway, but are about to be reopened. Traffic has been tailed back as far as Fanshawe Street in the city. In sport, the 6 Warriors players are suspended for mixing prescription drugs with energy drinks have apologised. The group were involved in a night out the day after the side's 42-0 drubbing by the Melbourne Storm 2 weeks ago. Here's Rugby League reporter Matt Chatterton.
Manu Vatuvei, Ben Matalino, Bodine Thompson, Sam Lasoni and Albert Vetti all admitted taking the concoction, but Conrad Harrell denied he took any of the drugs. Vatuvei, Matalino and Thompson were also suspended for the Kiwis test against Australia. Vatuvei was also put on medical leave but rejoined the team today, while the other 5 players all resumed training last week. In a statement released by the club, the players apologised for letting down their fans, teammates and Warriors staff. The Warriors General Manager Jim Doyle says he will continue having conversations with players about team standards. This is Matt Chatterton.
Stephen Adams has again proved his worth to Oklahoma City Thunder in their NBA Western Conference semi-final series against the San Antonio Spurs. He scored 16 points and 11 rebounds as the Thunder won 111-97 to level the best-of-7 series 2-2. Adams is on the verge of becoming the country's highest-paid athlete, with US media reports suggesting he's set to sign a 4-year contract worth more than $20 million a year. A strong final round by New Zealand golf number 1 Danny Lee has helped him to 9th place in the latest PGA Tour event in North Carolina. Compatriot Tim Wilkinson finished 11th. That's the news.
An in-depth investigation.
Anyone who thinks you can go into 11 million documents and find things overnight doesn't understand.
Official advice ignored.
We argued for a registry and for basically licensing, and so that some New Zealander who can be prosecuted if the information's not held.
The world watching.
We think there's enough here from this to say that New Zealand's reputation stands a very good chance of being tarnished.
Taxing times. Guy and Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the UN rapporteur on privacy, Joe Kanatachi, on why surveillance is worse than anything George Orwell predicted. And after 10, the strange and wonderful stories of those who migrated to make India their home, with New Zealand expat author John Gill Harris. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon, after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Net service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland often cloudy with scattered showers today. Auckland to Wellington, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, also Nelson, fine spells. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloud increasing this evening with isolated showers tomorrow morning, becoming fine again later tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, cloud and patchy drizzle spreading north this afternoon, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming generally fine. Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy with scattered rain this afternoon and again tomorrow afternoon and evening. Buller, cloudy periods with drizzle tomorrow night. Westland and Fiordland, rain or drizzle becoming heavy south of the glaciers tomorrow afternoon. And the Chatham Islands, fine tomorrow. It's 5:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. To the Panama Papers in a moment. We have extensive coverage of them tonight. What the papers say, what the PM says in response, what his opponents, including Winston Peters, say, and what the people say. All of that before 5:30. But first, very quickly, before any of that, as people attempt to head home in Auckland, we're going to go to the situation on Auckland's southern motorway after a truck carrying a digger struck the Penrose overbridge early this afternoon. Why is this so important? Well, the digger fell off the truck, blocking 2 lanes of southbound traffic. That's out of the city, causing severe congestion and leaving only 1 lane operational. Basically, the motorway has been a disaster. Traffic has backed up to Spaghetti Junction right in town, and motorists have been advised to stay at work or find other routes home. Brett Glidden is the Transport Agency's highway manager and joins us on the phone now. Welcome, Brett. Have you managed to get that digger out of the way?
Yeah, we have. So about 4:45 we opened all 3 lanes again. We've pushed it all off to the side. We'll come back at a later date, probably later tonight once the traffic cleared to remove it. But we've finally reopened all 3 lanes southbound and the northbound lanes remain open.
So is southbound moving?
It's starting to, but obviously there was a lot of congestion, having it constricted to 1 lane and then 2 for a period of time. That congestion went all the way back to the city, to Spaghetti Junction or Vic Park Viaduct. That's going to take a wee while to clear, unfortunately, but now we've released the bottleneck. It definitely is starting to move, and just looking at the real-time information now, and I've already, the end of the queue is already starting to move back down the southern motorway. But look, my advice would be, if you can hold off for a bit longer, it would make sense. It will make your trip home a lot better if you could just avoid travelling or stay at work a little bit longer before you jump in the car. It's just going to take a wee while for that backlog to clear.
Brett Glidden, who is the Transport Agency's highway manager, thank you very much indeed, Brett. We appreciate your time. So the digger has gone 3 lanes operational, but as Brett said, the traffic is backed up all the way into town. So if you're sitting in the city or on the North Shore and you can delay the trip home, do so. We turn now to the Panama Papers and the window they're providing into the world's rich and the opaque foreign trusts some have created for their money. some of them in New Zealand. RNZ, One News and investigative journalist Nikki Hager were given access to the leaked documents of the law firm Mossack Fonseca by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalism. They illustrate New Zealand's growing importance in Mossack Fonseca's global empire as the Panamanian company helps its clients park their money away from prying eyes. Patrick O'Mara on what the papers have revealed so far.
The Panama Papers reveal New Zealand's burgeoning role in Mossack Fonseca's global network and the key players based in the heart of Auckland. New Zealand is referenced more than 61,000 times, and the frequency of mentions increased from 2013, when the Panamanian law firm stepped up its promotion of this country to its clients. It worked hand in glove with Auckland accountancy firm Bentley's New Zealand and its co-founder Roger Thompson to set up secretive trusts that hid the real owners. Mr Thompson is mentioned over 4,500 times in the papers. A tax law professor at Auckland University, Michael Littlewood, says New Zealand's loose trust rules are aiding foreigners to dodge taxes back home.
It seems fairly plain that New Zealand is allowing itself to be used as a means by which people in other countries are avoiding the taxes they would otherwise have to pay in those countries. And in that respect, New Zealand is pretty plainly a tax haven.
Typical clients included Ecuadorian bankers, Colombian car dealers, Mexican celebrities and Brazilian lawyers. And some went to great lengths to protect their identity. One of the more convoluted structures was set up for a Russian-speaking, Spanish-based electrical engineer, Jose Ramon Lopez Lombana. He asked for 4 New Zealand companies and 4 New Zealand trusts to be established to deal with 4 Mexican companies, which passed money and fees from internet trading through New Zealand to a bank account in Prague in the Czech Republic. One of the journalists who trawled through the papers, Nikki Hager, says none of that information gets passed on to IRD.
The only place where those people's name, the real people who've got the money and are doing things and are not known about in their own countries, are written down is somewhere in the computer files of the Panamanian company. The New Zealand authorities never get to see it.
Following a blank refusal to admit anything was wrong when the Panama Papers first came out, the Prime Minister John Key has all but conceded changes to foreign trust laws are needed. And the Revenue Minister Michael Woodhouse says the government is open to changes that John Shewan may recommend as a result of his review into the disclosure rules covering foreign trusts registered in New Zealand. But both Mr Woodhouse and John Key are still insisting New Zealand's not a tax haven.
A tax haven is a place like, let's take somewhere like Switzerland. If you go to Switzerland and say the R. Christie Trust, what's inside it, they will not tell you. You come to New Zealand, any jurisdiction comes to New Zealand that we have an information sharing agreement, over 100 of them, we tell them.
Mr Key says the best way to tackle the issue is through the OECD to ensure a coordinated international response. For Checkpoint, Patrick O'Mara.
The Prime Minister pulled out of his scheduled weekly Monday interview with Morning Report. Takes place every Monday, but not this morning. Just after 4 o'clock, though, in the Beehive Theatre-Rep, Mr Key responded to the events, revelations and accusations of the day in his post-Cabinet media conference.
Okay, good afternoon. Can I start by making a couple of comments on foreign trusts following the release of the Panama documents? It's my clear expectation that all New Zealanders will pay their lawful share of tax. As a result of the Panama Papers, IRD has set up a small group to review the papers to ensure New Zealanders are meeting their tax obligations and to support other countries if requests are made for further information. New Zealand has and continues to have a strong reputation when it comes to tax transparency and the exchange of information. The government takes the issue seriously, and we've called for a review of disclosure rules for foreign trusts by tax expert John Shewan.
That was exactly an hour ago. John Key was straight onto the front foot, rejecting descriptions of New Zealand as a tax haven, citing measures already taken and mounting a robust defence of the government's conduct and position.
We've seen some people, including opposition parties, claim that New Zealand is a tax haven. That is utterly incorrect. The OECD has 4 criteria for assessing whether a country has harmful tax practices, including making them a tax haven. New Zealand does not meet any of them.
But as the PM defended the status quo, he also left open the doors of possibility. If changes are required, they'll happen.
If John Shewan or the OECD recommend further improvements, we're certainly open to them.
So that was the PM's position. On the one hand, there is no issue. On the other hand, if there is an issue, it will be addressed. But, as the first question after the PM's opening statement reminded us, the reassurances may need repeating again and again.
Prime Minister, is New Zealand a tax haven?
Definitely not. Good to see you're paying attention to the comments I just read out.
The PM's other issue may be that the broad brushstroke rejections, the repeated reassurances that everything or almost everything is fine, can't address the many specifics. There are over 10,000 foreign trusts now registered in New Zealand. Why? RNZ's political editor Jane Patterson pressed the PM on this, and here the general assertion that New Zealand is not a tax haven gave way to an inability to address specifics.
The papers show that a lot of the overseas people are using it for business interests, not connected to inheritance or things that you've talked about in terms of opposition parties, and countries that are unstable and that sort of thing. What reason would someone in Mexico, for example, using a business deal, have to set up a trust here in New Zealand?
So the first thing you appreciate is I haven't seen the papers, so it's very difficult to comment when I can't see the individual cases, nor am I a tax expert, so I can't comment on individual cases. But, for example, apparently there was one case I just heard someone talking about saying that the person was Mexican and had set up a trust because they were uncertain about Mexican inheritance law, tax law. Well, that's legitimate.
Examples that just refer to straight business deals. So
I can't answer why that is, but that's
connection to New Zealand be setting up trusts here.
Well, New Zealand is a jurisdiction which is a good jurisdiction to do that, and for all the reasons that we know, that we do have exchange of information, that we do have transparency, we do meet the highest possible code. So there's all sorts of reasons why people might, but you have to go and ask those who establish those why they do that. I'm just not the expert in that area.
It's the Prime Minister speaking at his weekly post-cabinet media conference within the past hour. In a moment, Winston Peters, New Zealand First Leader, former Treasurer in Jim Bolger's government and a politician who's been talking of the potential reputational damage to New Zealand since the Panama Papers first broke as an international story at the beginning of April. He is sitting beside me in the studio, but a source close to the National Party today told Checkpoint they believe this won't damage the government. The people who care don't vote national, he told me. And many people won't care, won't understand it, or both, he said. To see what people think, we went as close as we could to Mossack Fonseca, NZ. I'm on the corner of Queen and Victoria Streets in downtown Auckland. Behind me, 205 Queen Street. That's where Bentley's Chartered Accountants are located. Now, Roger John Thompson is a director of them. He's also a New Zealand director of Mossack Fonseca, and that same address is where Mossack Fonseca is listed as being in New Zealand. So we've come here to ask the people walking up and down Queen Street what they think about what they're learning from the Panama Papers.
I'd prefer us not to be a tax haven.
But you're not persuaded yet that we are one?
I'm on the fence. I think we're close, but I'm not convinced.
Do you think New Zealand is a tax haven?
Probably, yes.
Do you think New Zealand's a tax haven?
Oh, God.
Yes.
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 Do you care?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot.
A lot. And that was the majority view, a growing sense of unease. People cared, but it was a sense of the issue, a general disquiet, rather than specifics we encountered on Queen Street at lunchtime, 13 stories below the address given as Mossack Fonseca's New Zealand office. Do you think New Zealand's a tax haven?
Sounds like it.
It sounds like it?
Sounds like it.
Does that worry you?
I think it's concerning for New Zealand business a bit. We don't want to seem to be a bit of a soft touch.
And do you think there's the potential for that to become our reputation?
Oh, if people don't act quickly, perhaps it will. There'll be more and more of it.
Reputation was really important to the people we spoke to. A general feeling that this is not how they want New Zealand to be seen.
Well, it's not a good look for the country, is it? I mean, it's that whole perception thing, which I do give a damn about. Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought we were a tax haven until the Panama Papers came out and started suggesting that our relaxed taxation rules and regulations made us an object of interest to those people who wanted to hide their money from their own governments.
Obviously it's completely wrong. It's what's happening. It's really going to be going back on the government and the leadership that's
being undertaken.
What do you do, Philomena?
I'm a student in Canterbury,
And what are you studying?
nursing.
Good for you, Philomena. And when you get your job, will you pay all your tax?
Good question.
Of course you will, Philomena. There's no way around it.
I have to.
So I want to... Do you know anything about foreign trusts and the Panama Papers and all the things we're
I
learning?
saw it this morning on the breakfast show.
And what do you think about it?
It's a bit tricky because, like, with the new revelations and what's been found, it's it sounds like dirty stuff, but yeah.
Does it worry you?
A lot. Yeah, it does.
But Central Auckland is also a financial district, and people from that sector had very different views indeed.
I don't think we're a tax haven. I think our rules are pretty robust. We work in tax constantly, so we have some knowledge about tax, and I don't think it's actually a tax haven.
And so do you think there's foreign money in New Zealand avoiding tax at home?
No, because of the strict rules over in NZ, with FMC, FMA all included. I doubt it's hard to bend the rules in NZ with such a sound regulatory system.
Especially considering the scale of events that are taking place overseas. I don't think you could put what's happening here in the same sort of line.
We're asking people what they think about foreign trusts and whether you regard New Zealand as a tax haven now.
No, not at all. I have trusts. Yeah.
So what do you do with your trust?
It's for personal, private, just family. Just locking stuff up for family, that's all.
And so are you avoiding tax in any way with your trust?
No, pay more than my fair share, I think.
So the people who are here, for example, from somewhere in South America who have foreign trusts here, what are they doing with those trusts? Do you have any idea?
No, not really.
Do you care?
No, not really. No, couldn't care less.
5:22. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters has been calling for a commission of inquiry into what he says is New Zealand's role as a tax haven. Mr Peters, of course, was the man who released documents given to him in a wine box about the use of the Cook Islands by New Zealanders to manage their tax affairs, prompting a 3-year commission of inquiry. He is sitting beside me in the studio. Mr Peters, welcome to Checkpoint. Nice to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you the same question John Key was asked in the Beehive Theaterette about an hour and a bit ago. Is New Zealand a tax haven?
It is a tax haven because Mossack Fonseca say so, Bentley's downtown in Auckland say so, all of their correspondents say so. So Mr Key, really, I actually feel sorry for him. He's like a boy that's had a whittle behind the couch and he's denying it to mum, but saying, look, but if I have, then I'll mop it up. Now this is in all the space of 48 hours. There's no doubt it's a tax haven. The people who set it up claim that. That's why they're coming here in a torrent, up 500% in just the recent years.
What then should be the response? Because it seems inevitably divided along tribal political lines. So by and large, the National Party and its supporters, which I guess is ACT, are saying there's nothing to see here. The National Party's opponents are saying there's everything to see here, and inevitably we never progress further than that.
Well, that's sad, because there used to be an old saying in the National Party, my party, when it's right, should be kept right, and my party, when it's wrong, should be put right. Now, where's the second part of that equation? I saw interviews there where clearly the people have a certain political bent and they don't give a damn. Well, we're a country that used to have serious respect. And when you see British newspapers saying what's happening with New Zealand, it used to be squeaky clean. Then there is reputational damage.
You say British newspapers, the Prime Minister citing the OECD saying we are fully compliant. Actually, the OECD thinks we're doing a great job of working with them to ensure exactly this kind of stuff stops happening.
Well, that's false. The OECD is a group of countries, in most of which we have cross and reciprocal arrangements with them as to disclosure. None of these OECD countries, of course, appear in the Panama Papers. It's all the other ones, including us, Samoa, Niue and the Cook Islands, Jersey, Guernsey, the Caymans, Bermuda. Those are all the ones that are appearing in it, the Netherlands, Antilles. They're all appearing in it. And Mr Key he's saying, look, it's all nothing to see over here. He's taking you to a clean paddock. Over the fence is a paddock full of weeds. And he's denying that that's the paddock he's meant to be talking about.
So what needs to happen now? Andrew Little is saying no foreign trusts, full stop. Is he right?
Well, that absolutist statement rules out that there are legitimate reasons for trusts. But all those legitimate reasons will have certain provisions, and that is the beneficiary will be named. The secret about these trusts is that the beneficiary is never named. And if I was to come out of, for example, France and say, do I suspect some French guys here, then I have to know who I'm looking for. There's a massive haystack of tax evasion, and I have to know the beneficiary's name, which I might know, but I won't know the trust name that I put it in.
Okay, reasonably and practically, how is that achieved?
Well, what you've got to do is say, no, there will be full disclosure. And I tell you what, the foreign trust regime will be out of this country tomorrow. Because they came here for the one treasure we have. That's why they, in the Panama Papers, they call it the Treasure Islands. They came here for the one treasure we have, utter secrecy. And I'm afraid, Mr. Key, please don't go on making those statements, because all of the public relations from Mossack Fonseca and Bentley's, and indeed your lawyer Whitney's reference to the Panama law firm, of the credibility of this law firm in New Zealand, all say that it's a tax haven.
But wait a sec, they also came here because we are a stable democracy where, by and large...
That's the wonderful part.
Yeah, it is the wonderful
part. We've got the secret operation inside one of the great democracies in the world.
But don't we also offer, for example, and you were talking to me before we came in about women who might be trying to leave a relationship where they are seriously, either financially or in other ways, imperiled. They need to start life somewhere else. They're not trying to avoid any kind of tax, but they do need to start over. New Zealand is a sound and sensible place to do something like that, isn't it?
The first thing you would do is you tell key operatives in the IRD that is why you're there. You would state the good faith, the bona fides, the legitimacy of your purpose. That's not for wider disclosure.
Okay, is this going to play out like dirty politics? In other words, that the people who care don't vote National, the people who don't care do?
Well, that'd be very sad, and it'll be a terrible... I mean, it's a very damaging, defamatory statement of a lot of National Party people, because I know enough National Party people to know that they do deeply care. They might be conservative, they might be sort of old-fashioned in their ways, but they do think that New Zealand has a set of standards, a certain moral standard that they stoically stick to. None of this is what they will ever tolerate, if only they knew the truth.
Okay, so what happens now? Because John Shewan is going to do his inquiry.
Well, John Shewan, you see, is not the right person for
Winston Peters is saying this is a tax haven. John Key is saying this is not a tax haven. In other words, it looks like stalemate, doesn't it?
Look, first of all, they said that John Nash of the IRD was all over this issue. My response to that was, beg your pardon, John Nash was seriously criticised in the Wine Box inquiry on the Cook Islands for not understanding the law. Incidentally, at the time, a man called Sherwin was criticising me for being a liar and not knowing what I was talking about. Well, what's his response to that now? And also, he has been cited in other court cases in which his understanding of the law has been seriously criticised by the judiciary. He is not the right person. We should have an independent commission of inquiry conducted by someone with his hands or her hands away from politics, in whom we could repose our trust.
You got a name?
But here's the key thing. They have got to understand how complex these arrangements are, and for that they will need money and resources. When Mr. Key says our IRD is offshore and all over this, he has got to be joking. They haven't even got access to the documents. And so it's all a bluff. And I would say to Mr. Key, come on, a lot of New Zealanders thought that you, with your whiz-kid training in Merrill Lynch, would be all aware and suspicious, as some of us weren't, of this happening. You're letting them down, and you should stop doing so.
Winston Peters, New Zealand First Leader, thank you very much indeed for joining us in the studio this evening. It's 5:29 on Checkpoint. Coming up, Dunedin doctors consider legal action over the quality and availability of hospital food. The Ngāpuhi leader, Sonny Toa, has pleaded guilty to conspiring to pervert the course of justice after he was caught with 5 dead kiriru at Invercargill Airport in June of last year. And Fort McMurray officials say it may be years before the Canadian town returns to normal after fire has destroyed at least 1 in 5 homes. We're going to go there after the news. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text us on 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, or contact us via our Twitter and Facebook pages. Right, Katrina's just arriving with the 5:30 headlines, but before then, mystery shrouds how and why a woman ended up with a serious head injuries on the side of a road just north of Auckland. A police investigation is underway after a member of the public spotted her on Waifiu Conical Peak Road in Dome Valley which is kind of north of Warkworth, between Warkworth and Wellsford, about 7 o'clock this morning. Police are hoping a distinctive tattoo of a rose on the woman's lower left leg will help to identify her. Our police reporter Carla Penman has more.
Inspector Mark Fergus told media the woman is fighting for her life after some kind of attack.
At this stage, it's too early to tell where it occurred or even what has occurred. Our priority right now is to identify this woman lying in hospital.
He says the woman, who's believed to be in her early 20s to early 30s, suffered serious head injuries and will undergo surgery today.
We don't know her name. She's someone's daughter. We're appealing to the public now to assist us with identifying her. We have released a picture of a distinctive tattoo, a rose with the words Mum and Dad written on them, on her lower left leg, and we're hoping someone can help us.
Inspector Fergus says they don't know how long she might have been lying on the roadside, nor whether a car was involved. He says the police are keeping an open mind in their investigation and they're urging people to report any suspicious activity in the area last night or early this morning. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Carla Penman.
5:31.5 coming up. The Labour Party says plans to spend millions on emergency housing don't come close to addressing the issue of homelessness. We're going to look at this. First it was patients, now the resident doctors aren't happy with hospital meals in Dunedin, and the 22-year-old creating New Zealand's version of the London Underground map. It's going off. We'll talk to him later, but first here's Katrina Batten with the 5:30 headlines.
The Prime Minister says there may be rogue operators in New Zealand's foreign trust sector, but insists the country's broader regime is robust and legitimate. The Panama Papers have highlighted the ease of setting up secretive foreign trusts in New Zealand and show the Panama law firm Mossack Fonseca helped many people to park their money here. A short time ago, Mr Key front-footed the Panama Papers topic, saying it was utterly incorrect to call New Zealand a tax haven. The Australian Stock Exchange has halted the trading of shares in APN News and Media amid speculation the company is considering merging its New Zealand assets with those of its main rival Fairfax. This would bring the country's major newspapers and the News Talk ZB network under one umbrella. In a statement, APN says the halt will last until trading starts on Wednesday or it makes another statement. Ngāpuhi leader Sonny Tau has admitted conspiring to pervert the course of justice after being caught with 5 dead kereru last year. He's been indicatively sentenced to 3 months community detention and 100 hours of community work and fined $24,500. The Runanga won't comment on whether Tau will return to his position as chair of the board. The police say they're hoping a distinctive tattoo of a rose will help to identify a woman after she was found critically injured on a roadside in Dome Valley, north of Auckland. They say they don't yet know how long she was lying there, if a car was involved or if she suffered the injuries there or elsewhere. However, the police believe the woman is the victim of some kind of attack. The association representing junior doctors at Dunedin Hospital says it has the legal right to force the Southern District Health Board to change its meal supply contract. The Resident Doctors Association says the board did not consult it about switching to Compass, and it believes the quality of the food has changed substantially. Those are the headlines. I'll have more news, sport and weather at 6.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Turning to business news now with Eric Frickberg, who's joining us live out of the Wellington Newsroom. Eric, another media company in the spotlight today. Just hearing Katrina talk about this, APN News and Media. Trading in its shares has been halted until Wednesday. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, what we don't know is what will definitely happen. There's been a lot of speculation, John. One is that 2 newspaper chains could become one, that Fairfax, which has the Dominion Post, and APN, that has the New Zealand Herald, will join forces, become one organisation, and just to make things really cosy, News Talk ZB will climb into bed with them. But that's just a theory, John. A more plausible explanation, in my view, is that APN will divest itself of its New Zealand assets. It's done a similar thing in Queensland, and by doing that, it'll make its own position much more secure. And some support for that argument comes from the fact that Fairfax told the Exchange today that it had heard about these media reports about it, but it had, quote, nothing to disclose. So, John, something is happening, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? Not at all.
No, OK. We're putting in calls to people in Australia about this to try and get more, but as you say at the moment, Eric, no formal clarification. There's been further news on Air New Zealand and its alleged price fixing.
Absolutely, John. Air New Zealand has agreed to pay $35 million US, that's 51 million New Zealand, and they're paying it to claimants in a civil action in the United States who alleged that Air New Zealand and other airlines were colluding in the price of air freight between the year 2000 and the year 2006. Now, John, Air New Zealand is emphatic. It's done nothing wrong. It never ran any sort of cartel, but it says the chance of getting an unfair conviction levied against it in the US courts was so high that far better pay up now, settle out of court, get the thing over and done with and move on. That's the thing that is makes most sense from their point of view.
Eric, what about the markets today?
Markets are pretty quiet, John. Top 50 index unchanged, slightly little change. It fell 13 points to 6,885. The New Zealand dollar, John, is trading at 68.4 US cents and 92.7 Australian.
Eric Frickberg, live from our Wellington newsroom. Thanks so much, Eric. Really appreciate it. It's 24 minutes to 6, just looking at some of those Fairfax assets. The Dom Post, the Press, the Waikato Times, Auckland Now, the Southland Times, the Daily News in Taranaki, the Manawatu Standard, the Nelson Mail, the Marlborough Express and the Timaru Herald. That is a hell of a newspaper stable. Doctors working at Dunedin Hospital are fed up with the food being served in the staff kitchen since Compass Meals took over the meals contract. The quality of food at Southern District Health Board, that is Dunedin and Southland hospitals, continues to face harsh criticism, mainly from patients. Now a new survey has revealed 90% of resident doctors think the food has gone downhill since Compass took over this year. And as Peter Newport reports, the doctors are threatening legal action to get the menu changed back.
Dr. David Becker is in his second year at Dunedin Hospital. He works long days, sometimes 16 hours, with only a 20-minute break. And because there's nowhere for him to store food, he has to buy it. Dr. Becker is far from a fan of what food Compass is offering.
There's a lack of variety now, and sometimes there aren't even sufficient amounts of food to get your meal that you wanted. I guess the hospital is the one place where you probably expect a nutritious meal, that hits ticks all the right boxes. And I'm not sure some of the options that are being put forward are doing that currently.
And David Becker's dislike of the food on offer is shared by his colleagues. In a survey of more than 100 doctors by the Resident Doctors Association, 90% thought there'd been a decline in quality since Compass took over the previous in-house service. Most also complained of a lack of variety, especially for healthy food, and said that often stocks would run dry, leaving nothing to eat at all. Deborah Powell is the association's national secretary.
They found a definite decrease in the quality of food, a lack of variety being offered, but most importantly, insufficient range of healthy options being available for people. Also for the in-house cafeteria, the cafe seems to be just simply running out of food, so that's also a problem for those working in the hospital.
The association's now threatening legal action to have the food changed back. Deborah Powell says it has a contractual agreement with all New Zealand DHBs to be consulted on any change to hospital food. And the association's given the Southern District Health Board until the end of the week to respond. Ms Powell says that the complaints about the Compass-supplied Southern DHB food are now so widespread that it's time for action, but her association is not proposing a strike by doctors.
Essentially, what the legal situation is that district health boards can't change the food which is provided to residents without the residents' agreement, and we would be saying in this instance the food is definitely changed without our agreement, and we want it set back to the pre-existing state.
Deborah Powell says any legal challenge isn't about money, because it's food, not cash, that the doctors want.
We need the food. This is a health and safety issue for our people, so money is not going to make the difference. At 3 o'clock in the morning when you're on your 7th night and you've got another acute patient that you need to see, you actually need some nutritious food to keep you going, not $10 in your back pocket.
In a statement, the Southern DHB said it took the doctors' concerns seriously and have already responded to them. It says Compass has already agreed to meet with the association. For Checkpoint, this is Peter Newport.
And a short time ago, Compass sent us a statement. Its National Development and Innovation Manager, Lauren Scott, who's been on Checkpoint quite a few times, says the company's meeting with the Resident Doctors Association later in the week to discuss the issues raised in the survey. Ms Scott says the changes made in the cafeteria have been gradual and don't warrant the amount of dissatisfaction they've been met by. Compass also continued to defend the meals themselves and the amount on offer. It did, however, admit that at busy times people may not get their first choice. That statement from Compass received a short time ago. The Labour Party says plans to spend millions on emergency housing don't come close to addressing the issue of homelessness. But those at the coalface say the funding is crucial for their survival and to give desperate people shelter. This is another story that's unfolding today. Catherine Hutton has been looking at it.
Launching the policy at Wellington's night shelter this morning, Social Housing Minister Paula Bennett acknowledged more people are living on the streets, particularly in Auckland. She says that's a consequence of rising rents.
Today we get to announce an extra $41 million going towards emergency housing in New Zealand. 32 million of that will be to provide beds right throughout the whole country. And about 3,000 beds over the 12-month period and about 800 at any one time.
She says the money will go towards helping the 500 to 800 people who the government says are living in garages, cars and on the streets. But Labour's Phil Twyford says the government is only counting those who are sleeping rough.
Now, that's not a credible definition of homelessness anywhere in the world. Statistics New Zealand actually calculates homelessness in a much more comprehensive way than that. That includes people who are living in temporary, substandard, unsanitary accommodation, and there are around 30,000 of those people by the most recent calculations.
Paula Bennett says the funding, the first time a government has invested in the emergency housing sector, will help places like Wellington's night shelter.
What this does is give them certainty of funding, and then the money that they are getting from either their city councils or from trusts or other mechanisms, they can then put that towards more of that wraparound service that they see as so needed.
The shelter calls the announcement a lifeline, saying it was 3 months away from closing its doors, despite strong demand for its services. Its acting manager, Tyler Dunkel, says the new money will allow them to employ a social worker.
The social worker will be working with Welfare and Income and our guests to make sure that they're getting the maximum entitlement, such as getting an accommodation supplement. Quite frequently they aren't accessing those supplements, and that's one of the reasons why their budgets are quite a bit more constrained.
Adrian Whale, who chairs the Taitokara Emergency Housing Trust in Whangarei, says the cash injection is a welcome development.
We continue to receive twice as many requests for emergency housing as we can supply. So for us, finding another property, I think, will be top of our list over the next 6 months.
But Mr Twyford says the announcement reflects the government's failure to address the housing crisis.
If the government had actually done more to seriously tackle the causes of the housing crisis, by building more houses, by cracking down on speculators, by actually increasing the amount of state housing instead of selling off what it's got, then this problem that they're trying to fix wouldn't be nearly so bad.
The Salvation Army's Campbell Roberts says emergency housing is just the start.
There's got to be housing policy at the other end in terms of increased state rental, social housing, affordable home ownership packages. And that's the problem at the moment. People can't move from state housing, or they can't move from social housing because there are just no alternatives. And so it does require a whole framework of assistance.
Mr Roberts says they are hoping the budget later this month will contain more measures to deal with the housing shortage. For Checkpoint, Catherine Hutton.
Let's go to Canada now. Fort McMurray officials say it may be years before the city returns to anything resembling normal, estimating at least a fifth of homes have been destroyed by wildfires, which have now been burning for a week. The blaze now covers an area of 1,600 square kilometres, and although the change in weather has slowed its progress, it's still too dangerous for residents to return. In a moment, we'll hear from Bryce Stewart, who's standing on a highway just outside Fort McMurray. But first, here's our reporter, Alex Ashton.
A week on, and the fire that forced almost 90,000 people from their homes has left Fort McMurray looking like a scene from Armageddon. At least 1,600 buildings have been razed, leaving just scorched earth and hotspots behind. James and Candice Riley had watched residents of neighbouring suburbs evacuate when they too were told to leave. They had just minutes to grab what they could and were on their way out of town when fire took their home of 20 years. The couple watch as the smoke alarm sounds, a window shatters and plumes of ashy smoke pour into their living room. Not even the fish tank is spared. The response to the fire has been massive. More than 500 firefighters are still battling the blaze around Fort McMurray with the help of 15 helicopters and 14 air tankers. One firefighter described the fire as a beast.
I don't consider myself a hero, but I've met more heroes in this experience than I've ever thought existed. Sorry.
More than 1,400 firefighters and 130 helicopters continue to fight dozens of other blazes across the province. The fire slowed over the weekend, moving away from Fort McMurray, threatening the neighbouring province of Saskatchewan. The Royal Canadian Armed Forces helped remaining residents evacuate to the cities of Calgary and Edmonton, where they say they can be supported long term. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
Well, Brian Stewart is a reporter with CBC National News. We got hold of her this afternoon. She was at a cordon on a highway just out of Fort McMurray. I spoke to her via Skype video.
Well, where the fire is, and I'll do a little bit of a walk here, hopefully this works, it's down this road. So it's about 20 kilometers down this road is the city of Fort McMurray, and that's where the fire tore through earlier this week. Now, right now, it's 160,000 hectares, and to give you some perspective on that, that's bigger than Toronto, Canada, which is Toronto's Canada's largest city. So this is a massive fire, but the good news is that this fire didn't double in size this weekend, and that's something the firefighters were really afraid of, that the fire could just, really explode and head towards the northeast of this province and possibly cross into the next province, Saskatchewan. Well, that didn't happen, and that's because of the weather. The weather is cooled down considerably, and it even got a little bit of rain this morning. Not enough rain to make a huge difference, but just enough rain to really kind of give firefighters the upper edge. There are more than 500 of them now. They've come here from all across Canada working to put out this fire, and it looks like they are starting to make progress because at least it's not growing.
Brian, have people been back into Fort McMurray? Is there some initial assessment of the damage being made?
Well, the thing right now, which officials say, is there was an initial assessment a few days ago where they said more than 1,600 homes and buildings. But that was an estimate from Wednesday, I believe. So they haven't given any kind of updated number. So it will likely be higher than that. The question is just how much higher.
Brian Stewart, who's a reporter with CBC, she was joining us by Skype from the cordon as close to Fort McMurray as people who aren't emergency services are able to go. It's 12 minutes to 6 now. Let's go to Invercargill. The Ngāpuhi leader, Sonny Tau, has pleaded guilty to having his son-in-law try to take the rap for killing Kereru. Tau was caught with 5 dead birds at Invercargill Airport last June. Today he appeared in the Invercargill District Court and learned his sentence. Ian Telfer, our reporter, was there.
It's a case that's upset his iwi Ngāpuhi, the southern tribe Ngāi Tahu and conservationists. Today, Sonny Tau asked for a sentence indication and was warned conspiring to pervert the course of justice was a serious crime and he could expect home detention for up to 7 months. But in the end, the judge reduced the punishment to 3 months detention, mainly with weekend curfew, and 100 hours of community service educating Māori in the north about protecting wildlife. For shooting the birds, Tau's to pay $24,500 in fines and costs to the Department of Conservation. Afterwards, Sonny Tau's lawyer, John Munro, says Tau got a fair hearing and is very pleased.
I think it's the final sentence is a reflection of the crime and his culpability in it, and so I think it's a very good sentence and a very fair sentence.
Tau was quiet all day, staring at the floor during most of the hearings, and only emerging from the courthouse with a few words in te reo and then in English.
What I said was I'm just sorry for what's happened. And my concentration now is to get this contribute back to the community.
The case has had many twists. It emerged today that Tau's son-in-law, Douglas Sadlier, was sentenced last November for lying to DOC staff by trying to take the blame off Tau. Sadlier was fined $1,000. Text messages were discussed in court, in which Tau tells Sadlier what to say about the bag the Kereru were found in. The dock prosecutor, Penny Williams, says the sentence is appropriate given everything that's taken place.
Well, it certainly is disappointing that a person of Mr To's mana was involved in offending of this nature.
And do you think that he's learned his lesson?
I do. As his lawyer stated today, he has had a significant fall from grace, and that's been acknowledged in the sentence, which is too likely to be imposed.
The sentence will be formally imposed next month when Sunny Toe's sentenced by video link from Auckland. At the Invercargill District Court for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
Providers of home support services to more than 100,000 people say they've been gouged by underfunding and they're angry. The comment from Home and Community Health Association representatives came at a health summit organised by the Labour Party at Parliament today. Our health correspondent, Karen Brown, was there.
Labour invited a wide range of health groups and observers to discuss its view that health funding increases over the past 6 years have been insufficient. Its finance spokesman, Grant Robertson, says the sector has been left with a $1.7 billion funding gap, which is causing stress and strain across the sector.
And in the real world, that means that people are not getting the surgeries they need, they're not getting the support they need from the mental health system, they're not getting access to the primary care that's required. They are the real world impacts of having $1.7 billion taken out of the health budget.
Julie Haggie of the Home and Community Health Association says she knows all about that as the chief executive of an organisation supporting 108,000 people in their own homes. She says their group has been both gouged and scoured out by insufficient funding.
Providers have mined their overheads, they have mined their training, they have mined margins for staff having training. We've now got 60% of our workers on the minimum wage because of that. You just can't manage a service on this sort of service on what our members have had to put up with.
Ms Haggie says many of those being supported at home have chronic diseases and generally they're more unstable than rest home residents. She says they need wraparound services but they're not getting it.
Instead, we're seeing a scouring out. Every time the minimum wage is not funded, which it has not been for the last 8 years, it takes $7 million out of our sector. There's $50 million over since 2006, 2007 has been sucked out.
Ms Haggie says the quality of services has fallen and it makes her angry. But her most stinging criticism is for the Health Ministry. She says it's made little progress on recommendations from an independent review of the sector published last August.
So the Ministry's held out a little light, a flickering light to us. Another working party is what you need. Another working party. I mean, now our trust and confidence is pretty low.
A spokesperson for Grey Power, Jo Miller, says she's appalled at the more than 158,000 New Zealanders unable to get specialist appointments for non-urgent surgery, such as hip and knee replacements, because local health boards don't consider them serious enough.
What's even more appalling is that we're now finding that the younger people are not meeting the criteria because if you get it over 75, you're only going to need one knee operation. If you get it when you're younger, you might need two.
A spokesperson for the nurses' organisation, Jen Lawless, says nurses too feel the effects of underfunding in health.
They are upset that they have to do more with less, that they're insulted when we talk about efficiency and effective healthcare because they're doing their best. They don't get toilet breaks anymore.
The Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, says it's incorrect to claim there is a $1.7 billion funding gap because health funding has increased by $4 billion to $15.9 billion since 2008. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Karen Brown.
Right, fairly full on first hour, so let's have a bit of a change. For anyone who's ever been to London for the first time, one of the defining experiences is catching the tube, particularly when you're from a country that doesn't have an underground. Down into the earth, all that noise, all those people, and that wonderful map. Well, a Christchurch student, Andrew Douglas Clifford, had exactly that experience. But Andrew's doing a master's degree in Geographic Information Science at the University of Canterbury, and he loves maps. Suddenly his expertise and enthusiasm found a creative voice. The 22-year-old had the idea of doing a New Zealand version of the London Underground map. He did it, showing New Zealand's state highways, posted it on social media, and then, well, let's get Andrew to tell you about it himself, starting with whether he's always been a fan of the London Underground.
Yes, absolutely. I've always been a big fan of
maps in general. But yeah, there's something that's just really cool about the style in which the underground maps are done, which is really what inspired me.
Yeah, they're beautiful, aren't they? And the thing is, they're so aesthetically pleasing. They're not actually entirely geographically accurate, are they?
No, it's all about the connections between the places, so it sort of simplifies out all the sort of complicated sort of bits in between places.
And so you can get away with that when you're doing a map of the underground, but when you're doing a map of the overground, i.e. roads in New Zealand, the map you're doing has to resemble the fact, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, which is sort of the reason why I included the outline. So it's to give people more sort of familiarity about where things are, but obviously it's not nearly as precise as a road map, for example. But it's sort of to help familiarise yourself, yet still retain some of the benefits of a tube map.
Yeah, and if people want precision, they can get GPS or an old-fashioned map. I think, as you said in your first answer, it's the art, it's the sense of connectivity, it's the sense of how things click together. You know, I think that's what is so lovely about maps like this.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, I've loved maps as far as I can remember, and I studied geography at university, so I've sort of been heavily involved in creating maps then as well.
And they would have been very literal, wouldn't they? Very accurate, very precise.
Yes, very much so.
So you took this lovely combination of enthusiasm and expertise. You made your New Zealand maps, and they've just sort of taken off, haven't they? They've absolutely connected with people.
Yeah, I mean, I've been absolutely blown away by the response I've got because, I originally posted on social media just to see what people thought of it, and yeah, it was nothing what I expected. So yeah, it's been great.
And then you had a call from somebody who wanted to release it commercially?
That's right, yeah. I partnered with a company called The Good Print, which approached me about doing some prints to sell online, which is something I only just recently launched on Tuesday, and I've had an amazing response from that.
And so they're selling like hotcakes?
Yeah, it's been just amazing. I can't believe how big it's gotten just in a couple of days.
Andrew, I guess lots of people have GPS now, either in their cars or on their phones or both. Are maps becoming objects of affection but somewhat anachronistic and quaint? The old-fashioned kind of maps, the atlases we all had, the maps you unfolded on big journeys, are we losing them?
Well, I don't think so, because there's a lot, well, it depends on whether you're a map enthusiast like me, but maps are very good at connecting with people, with their place, which I think is quite important. So even though we're moving sort of into a digital age of maps, I think that we're definitely still connected there.
Because maps tell a story, don't they? I mean, if I look at your map and I look at roads that I've travelled, and I remember the journey, and I remember the things I did there, and I remember the people I did them with, and I'm not sure that happens when you're looking at GPS, does it?
No, yeah, you're right, because quite a lot of people that have commented on my map have said pretty similar things, and they remember their time that they did a road trip or when they visited New Zealand, which is quite cool to me.
Andrew Douglas Clifford, who is a postgraduate student at the University of Canterbury. I'm just being passed scripts. We're going to read some feedback before we go into the 6 o'clock news with Katrina Batten. Dear John, putting John Key's mate John Shewan in charge of a tax review is like putting Scrooge in charge of organising the staff Christmas party. Key needs to move beyond his stereotypical view of tax havens and appoint someone much more objective to head up a tax system overall. Yours, says Jonathan. John Shewan, we've spoken to him on this program, and he's absolutely adamant he's the right man for the job. He's absolutely adamant he is objective, he is dispassionate, and he does want to get this right. So it will be fascinating to see what he comes back with by the end of June, which is not that many weeks away now. 7 weeks away. Tax avoidance is legal, but tax evasion is illegal. This piece of semantic sophism, typical of those who think financial fraud tax evasion is moral, as John Key would like us to believe. A reminder, 8 trillion UK pounds has been siphoned away in these trusts, many, no doubt, in New Zealand. It's very difficult, of course, to ascertain any of this. How many trusts are here? We now know somewhere in excess of 10,000, but what's in them and how much money they contain, who would even begin to know that. Obviously, we will have more on the Panama Papers after 6 and more again tomorrow night as this story unfolds. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell, great to have your company. If you're listening on the radio, we're delighted to have your company. If you want to watch us, you can do so screening live on Freeview Channel 50, streaming live on the RNZ website. Coming up in the next 29 and a half minutes, RNZ's political editor, Jane Patterson, on delving into the Panama Papers, which she has actually been doing. She has seen these things. Double murder accused Kamal Reddy blames a man called James, and TVNZ is under fire for racist comments. We have a story coming up from Mihi Narangi Forbes on that. Quite a lot more in the next 29 minutes, but first here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The Prime Minister remains adamant the country's foreign trust regime is robust and legitimate, but John Key concedes there may be rogue operators working within the New Zealand sector. Here's our political reporter May Heron.
The Panama Papers have highlighted the ease of setting up secretive foreign trusts in New Zealand and show the extent to which the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca has helped people to do it. At his post-cabinet news conference this afternoon, Mr Key front-footed the controversy, saying it's utterly incorrect to call New Zealand a tax haven. He says there's a very thorough process people have to go through to establish a foreign trust in New Zealand, including knowing the clients and where the money comes from. Mr Key says the government remains open to making changes to the current law, including disclosure rules, if either the Panama Papers or the Schuin Review reveal any problems. From Parliament, May Heron.
The Ngāpuhi leader, Sonny Tau, has admitted to conspiring to pervert the course of justice. Tau was caught with 5 dead kereru at Invercargill Airport last June. It emerged in the Invercargill District Court today. He originally told dog staff he had killed the birds himself, but changed his story when his son-in-law, Douglas Sadlier, wanted to take the blame for him. He admitted the conspiring charge today. On the original kereru charges, he'll pay a fine of $24,500, including costs. Tau's lawyer, John Munro, has no argument with that.
I think it's the final sentence is a reflection of the crime and his culpability in it, and so I think it's a very good sentence and a very fair sentence.
John Munro, Te Runanga a Iwi o Ngāpuhi, says it will give full consideration to today's court decision but won't comment on whether Tau will return to his position as the chair of the board from which he stepped aside last year. The police are trying to work out how a woman with a distinctive rose tattoo came to be lying on the side of a North Auckland road with serious head injuries. They say a member of the public spotted her on Waifu Conakul Peak Road in Dome Valley at about 7 this morning. Inspector Mark Fergus says the woman, who's believed to be in her 20s or early 30s, is fighting for her life in hospital after some kind of attack, which may or may not have happened in the area.
Because she's unable to speak to us, we haven't been able to identify her. We believe the distinctive tattoo on her lower left leg will help us identify her. Someone out there will know her.
Mark Ferguson says the police don't know if a car was involved in what happened. The Earthquake Commission is introducing a faster process for handing over quake-damaged homes to private insurers when claims exceed the $100,000 cap. The Insurance Council says in the last quarter 403 such homes were handed over. The Commission says it's working on implementing the process with Southern Response and IAG, which have the most overcap customers. A spokeswoman, Trish Keith, says over the next few weeks EQC will phone about 300 customers whose claims are likely to go over cap. The property owner will then get a call from their insurer taking full responsibility for managing the claim thenceforward. Ms Keith says the aim is to transfer properties in a matter of weeks rather than months. The Union for Primary School Teachers is urging schools to give beginning teachers permanent jobs and more support. The Educational Institute says some schools are not doing enough to help new teachers get full registration. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The NZEI wants schools to sign up to a charter that commits them to giving new teachers the support they need to get full registration. The union says only 15% of newly graduated teachers get full-time permanent jobs, and some struggle to gain full registration because they can only find part-time or short-term roles. It says some schools are breaching employment laws by hiring beginning teachers on fixed-term contracts simply so they can try them out, rather than because they have a genuine fixed-term vacancy. This is John Gerritsen.
The Selwyn District Council has declared a prohibited fire season with effect from today. The district's rural fire officer Douglas Marshall says low rainfall has made vegetation very dry, and combined with very dry soil, that means fire can easily start and quickly get out of control. No outdoor fires can now be lit in the Selwyn district, and the burning of crop stubble is forbidden. All fire permits previously issued by the council are cancelled. In sport, the Warriors team management say there'll be ongoing discussions with players about the standard of behaviour expected. 6 players suspended after a night out during which they mixed prescription drugs with energy drinks have apologised today for letting down their fans, teammates and Warriors staff. The group, which included leading player Manu Vatuvei, were suspended for 1 NRL game and 3 of them for the Kiwis test against Australia. The veteran striker Rory Fallon has earned a surprise recall to the All Whites training squad for the upcoming Oceania Nations Cup. The 34-year-old's been included in coach Anthony Hudson's training squad, which mainly features under-20 players. Hudson will name his squad for the tournament on Thursday. Team New Zealand skipper Glenn Ashby is promising a more polished performance from his team following their narrow victory at the latest America's Cup World Series event in New York. The New Zealanders had to start the final race of the regatta at the back of the field after crossing the start line early. They overcame the penalty to go on and win what Ashby says was a very challenging regatta.
We'll just keep chipping away, a lot to debrief on for all the teams here, I think, at this sort of an event. So at the end of the day, very, very pleased with how we went, and a great result to extend our lead in the America's Cup World Series.
Team New Zealand skipper Glenn Ashby, and that's the news.
On Nights tonight after the news at 7, award-winning filmmaker and historian Rachel Landers, who's explored the unsolved mystery of the 1978 bombing of the Hilton Hotel on Sydney's George Street, Australia's first act of terrorism. We go all spacey when former Mount John Observatory Superintendent Alan Gilmore discusses the large, slow rotation of Earth's axis called precession. Plus, we have an inside documentary and more on Nights after the news at 7 tonight on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland often cloudy with scattered showers today. Auckland to Wellington, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Also Nelson, fine spells. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloud increasing this evening with isolated showers tomorrow morning, becoming fine again later tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, cloud and patchy drizzle spreading north this afternoon, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming generally fine. Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy with scattered rain this afternoon and again tomorrow afternoon and evening. Buller, cloudy periods with drizzle tomorrow night. Westland and Fiordland, rain or drizzle becoming heavy south of the glaciers tomorrow afternoon, and for the Chatham Islands, fine tomorrow. It is 6:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. We're going to hear from Peter Dunn in a moment, who says he was somewhat surprised about the number of trusts in New Zealand. Remember, he was Minister for Revenue and he says IRD didn't tell him they were growing at such a dramatic rate. We will also hear from Edward Gay, our Auckland court reporter, on the Kamal Reddy trial, and calls for TVNZ to apologise about comments one of its presenters made. But the Prime Minister is trying to front-foot the Panama Papers controversy, promising to act if any significant problems are revealed through the documents or the review of disclosure rules. The Panama Papers have highlighted the ease of setting up secretive foreign trusts in New Zealand and show the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca helped many people, including Colombian car dealers and Mexican celebrities, to park their money here in New Zealand. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, is in our gallery office. Jane has had access to these documents. Hi, Jane. Welcome.
Hi, John.
A busy old day. I heard you asking questions of the Prime Minister in the post-cabinet media conference. In fact, we played a couple of those exchanges. And I was taken by the fact that on the one hand, the Prime Minister says there's nothing to see here, this is not a tax haven. On the other hand, when you raise specifics, he says, well, I can't respond because I haven't seen the specifics. Is that a paradox?
Look, it's just a political strategy, John. So the Prime Minister's not going to want to admit that there's a problem here with New Zealand's foreign trust regime. So what he's saying is, overall it's robust, it's legitimate. There might be a few rogue operators operating here, but they're not immediately obvious. But he's keeping himself very open, and the government, to making changes to the disclosure laws, which is critical. And of course, that's one of the terms of reference of John Shewan, so that was already being looked at. Also, this afternoon saying that look-through companies, a company structure that is being used by Mossack Fonseca, is also something the government would look at. There is legislation in the House at the moment that was introduced last week. He didn't know the details of exactly how that would change it, but these look-through companies were given as one of the main reasons in 2013 by Mossack Fonseca when they sent out a big email saying New Zealand's one of our preferred jurisdictions, and that's one of the reasons. And also, if anything else comes up, he says they are willing to look at it. Also confirming that team at the Inland Revenue Department will be set up not only to look at any cases that arise, but take a very wide look at the Panama Papers and any issues that come up through them.
So Inland Revenue's looking at them. This John Shewan inquiry is now really, really important for all sorts of reasons. One, if you want to be constructive, getting the response right. Two, if you want to be a little bit more cynical, managing the politics, right?
Absolutely, and the John Shewan review fulfils a certain purpose, and that is for the government to say we are not just sitting on our hands, we are doing something. And it took probably a couple of days when the first Panama Papers came out. It became quickly apparent to Mr Key as that week back in April rolled out that the government was going to have to do something. There was a lot of political pressure, so the Shewan review was announced, so they can tick that box. We are doing things, but I don't think that's enough, and that's why we're hearing him be very open at the moment to not ruling out any, if something comes up, we'll look at it. So trying to be confident and instill confidence about the trust regime, but also appearing very open to making changes if necessary.
Jane, can you tell us a little bit about the process and how it unfolds from here? So you, Giles Beckford, Patrick O'Mara, our colleagues from TVNZ and Nikki Hager have been able to look through them. Do you search them as if it was a Google search? Is that how it works?
Yes, so for a start we had a list of MPs, cabinet ministers, businesses, people who we thought, would be publicly accountable, I suppose, in the first place. And we started running them through the search database. There are two databases. There's one that contains details of clients and companies of Mossack Fonseca, and at a deeper level, emails, exchanges, and that's really where you get the detail about the story, because often just in the more publicly accessible, even in the Mossack Fonseca database, you can't see exactly who they're talking about. Right. So that's where the emails are invaluable, because they're literally exchanging information about who the trusts are for, passports, power bills, and that's all contained in that kind of lower level. There's also a fascinating database that you can plug a company or trust name into, and it actually shows you all of the links that it has in the Mossack Fonseca system. So in some case you'll see an innocuous looking company, you'll click the link, and then literally 5-6 thousands of companies will bloom out. So it just shows that through that one company or trust, so many other companies are at arm's length from potentially public records.
Okay, so eventually everyone, anywhere, will be able to search these documents, so we can expect to see more and more and more to come, can't we?
Yeah, it is my understanding that the database that's going to be released by the ICIJ tomorrow will be companies and directors. It's my understanding, and this hasn't been confirmed, just what we sort of understand is that we will, the team, the New Zealand team, will still be able to access the documents underneath. Yep. And it doesn't sound like that material is going to be out on public release. Okay. But look, from tomorrow we're going to be asking all of it, our RNZ audience, the TVNZ audience, anybody to have a look through all those documents, see what they can find, and certainly let us know if they do come across anything. There are 60,000 papers specifically relating to New Zealand. It's a big field, so this is just the very beginning.
Jane Patterson, our political editor, thanks so much, Jane. We really appreciate your time. Jane was coming to us live from the gallery office. If you're watching, you will have seen three colleagues sitting beside her. Well, one, May Heron, has been speaking to Peter Dunn. Now, the number of foreign trusts established in New Zealand has skyrocketed in the last decade, from nearly 2,000 in 2006 to over 10,000 now. The United Future leader was the Minister of Revenue for a large chunk of that period, from 2005 to 13, and he told May he was not told by IRD at any point about the rising number of foreign trusts.
I don't recall ever receiving any advice from Inland Revenue that the foreign trust regime was potentially problematic or a vehicle for tax evasion or being used improperly. But I think that on the face of it, a revelation that the numbers have exploded nearly fourfold in less than a decade has to be of some concern.
Would you have expected to be told as the Minister of that time about what the statistics were doing?
I would certainly have expected to have been informed if the Inland Revenue Department had considered that there was a problem and that these entities were being used for significant tax evasion. And I find it a little hard to believe that the explosion in numbers that occurred wouldn't have raised some suspicions in that regard.
So then where was the problem? Where was the failing? Was it with the Inland
Well, I'm
Revenue?
not sure where the problem was, whether it was the information was hard to come by, whether it was that there were other priorities that the department felt it had, or whatever, I don't know. All I'm saying is, with the benefit of hindsight, and hindsight I acknowledge can be a wonderful thing, that I would have thought some alarm bells would have been raised.
Will you be seeking any answers from IRD or anything in terms of...
Well, I don't have any responsibility for IRD anymore, so I can't do that directly.
But in terms of, obviously, you being the Minister for that period of time and you not being told anything about this, will you be seeking any answers in terms of that?
Well, it's a historic factor now. I mean, I don't have responsibility right now. I can't demand answers to things that happened some time ago for which I'm not responsible. I remain concerned given the figures that have been revealed.
Is that something you would raise with the now Minister of Revenue, Michael Woodhouse?
It may well be.
Peter Dunn talking to May Heron. The man accused of a cold case murder says, "I didn't do it, James did." Kamal Reddy is giving evidence in his own defence at the High Court in Auckland, where he's denied charges of murdering his ex-girlfriend, Pakisa Yusuf, and her 3-year-old daughter. The two went missing in 2006, and their bodies weren't found until 8 years later, buried under a motorway bridge on Auckland's North Shore. Our Auckland Court reporter, Edward Gay, has been covering the case, and he joins us in the studio. Welcome, Edward. Who is James?
Well, according to Mr Reddy, he met James for the first time while out shopping at Pack and Save in Botany Downs Shopping Centre, and James was with Miss Yusuf at the time. He was introduced to him. He described James as a part Indian man, tall, well-built, and he apparently works as a security guard. He didn't know James's surname or where he lived, but he said that when he went round later to visit Miss Yusuf in her Howick address, he found James at home, but James said that Miss Yusuf and her daughter were out visiting friends, and that was the first meeting.
Okay, then James turned up at his home, allegedly, reportedly?
That's right. Days later, Mr Reddy said James turned up and he told him that he'd killed Pakisa Yusuf and her daughter, known as Jojo, and that he was asking for a spot to bury them. Mr Reddy said that he suggested to James that he should go to the police, but he said that James threatened him and said that he had friends who would come and see Mr Reddy if he told anyone. He said that James suggested a spot in Albany where he'd been growing cannabis and he knew that there was construction going on in the spot. And Mr Reddy said his uncle worked in construction and that he would go and visit him to ask him to show him the spot. Well, he went round there after a short sleep, went round there to Bal Naidu, that's his uncle's home, and Bal Naidu, this is in the middle of the night, drove him out to the spot. Now, Mr Naidu has given evidence, and I talked to you about this a few days ago. Yeah. You know, he says that it was Mr Reddy told him that he had killed Miss Yusuf and her daughter, and that he had the bodies in the back of his car when he came over. Mr Reddy was asked about that by his lawyer, Jonathan Krebs, today. He said that that was completely incorrect, never said that.
Okay, some background information learned today. Was that right, Edward?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Mr Reddy started off his evidence by talking about his upbringing. Born in Fiji, left school at a young age after primary school pretty much, did a couple of years high school, dropped out of school, became a mechanic, and then he moved to New Zealand. And he said that after he had a 2-year working visa here, but that ran out and he ran into these immigration problems. He said that Miss Yusuf's father actually offered to help out, and he said that the father of Miss Yusuf arranged for a sort of a fake de facto relationship between Miss Yusuf and Mr Reddy, and that the arrangement was that Mr Reddy would pay between $5,000 and $10,000 for this. But he said he never lived with Miss Yusuf, that he did have fights with Miss Yusuf's ex, and on one occasion he was sent to hospital. Another occasion the courts heard that it wound up in court and he actually pleaded guilty, and that was in relation to a machete attack. He said that he had to do an anger management course for that.
Edward Gay, who's been in the High Court in Auckland, thank you very much indeed. Edward, nice to have you in here, as always. 6:20. There are calls for TVNZ to apologise after the state broadcaster aired comments about Māori representation on its 7 Sharp programme that have been condemned as deeply offensive and sparked a social media storm. Even 2 of TVNZ's own presenters have joined the fray, saying Mike Hosking's comments have upset them too. Our Māori Issues correspondent Mihingarangi Forbes reports.
Last week, New Plymouth Mayor Andrew Judd announced he would not seek a second term, citing the abuse he had received over his failed attempt to introduce Māori representation in the city. Mr Judd said the backlash over the issue even included being spat on in front of his children in the supermarket. TVNZ's 7 Sharp was among those covering the story, but later in the show, presenter Mike Hosking added his opinion, which echoed the resistance Mr Judd had been describing.
Sad to say I'd never personally attack him, obviously, but he's completely out of touch with Middle New Zealand. There's nothing wrong with Maori representation on councils, because any Maori who wants to stand for a council is more than welcome to do so, and you can sell your message, and if you're good enough, you'll get voted on. Simple as that.
Well, clearly the big issue here was his message wasn't sold before he was elected.
And that was co-host Tony Street at the end. Medical student Kira May was upset by Mr Hosking's comments and wrote a response on the show's Facebook page, saying he was ignorant of the numerous studies that she says prove there is continued and sustained racism at all levels of New Zealand society. Nearly 7,000 people liked her post, which Ms May signed off by describing herself as a middle-class, university-educated Māori with a clean police record.
You know, I think Middle New Zealand contains a huge portion of, really caring, compassionate New Zealanders that want what's best for our country and that do care about Māori issues. And I think Middle New Zealand also includes a huge number of hardworking Māori, employed Māori, educated Māori, and Māori in all sorts of professions.
Māori representation on local councils is significantly lower than the proportion Māori make up in the population. Some councils have no Māori representatives at all. Now Mr Hosking's own colleagues at TVNZ are speaking out publicly. Yesterday on TVNZ's Marae programme, Miriama Kamo and Scotty Morrison said they too were upset by Mr Hosking's personal editorial. Here's what Ms Kamo had to say.
The comments made after that story upset many, Māori and Pākehā, including me. Here's what it is to be Māori. I once lost a job when I was a teen because I corrected the boss when he mispronounced my name. When I arrived for work the next day, he marched me to the back door, opened it, held my pay packet outside and told me to get out. I was devastated, fired over my Māori name.
Kira May sympathises with Ms Kamo, saying she was bullied at school in Dunedin for being Māori and has a story about her own Māori name.
I tried to change my name or my name's pronunciation, so I didn't want to be known as Kira. Rather, I insisted that it was Kira with a Keira, and it was Irish, or at best, it was Irish name with a Māori spelling or something like that.
The calls for an apology continue to swirl on social media. While Miriama Kamo isn't calling for an apology, she's certainly making her views clear.
Like most Māori, I have lived with casual and often deliberate racism my entire life. But when we use a powerful primetime television platform to dismiss and ignore racism in our community, in my view, that's unacceptable.
The Māori Party has presented a petition to Parliament calling for the establishment of Māori wards on district councils. For Checkpoint, Mihingarangi Forbes.
A TVNZ spokesperson says the state broadcaster has received formal complaints about the comments, which its committee has yet to review. The spokesperson says in terms of the dialogue between colleagues, there has been some discussion about this piece, as you've seen. Robust conversation and differing viewpoints are not unusual in the current affairs environment. Coming up at World Watch PM at 6:30 with John Greaves, a man who used vigilante death squads to get rid of criminals, could become the next president of the Philippines. Extremely popular politician. And Greeks to contribute more for their pensions but will get less in return. Some sport now. The New Zealand horse rider Sir Mark Todd likes his chances of winning a 6th Olympic medal if he makes the equestrian team to compete at the Rio Games in August. Sir Mark is upbeat about his chances of making the team, which would be the 60-year-old's 7th Olympics after he finished 4th at the prestigious badminton horse trials in Britain this morning. He told our sports reporter Joe Porter he's pleased with his efforts on Leonidas too, and he now has his eyes firmly set on Rio.
Very happy. I was a bit disappointed after dressage. I felt, the horse didn't perform as well as I know he can do, and we were left a little bit far off the pace. But after that, he was superb on the cross country and jumped the super round today, and has finished feeling really good. So, delighted.
Yeah, obviously some excellent form to be heading towards Rio with. You must be fairly confident of being selected in that 4-strong team.
Well, I would hope so. Like my horse last week in Kentucky finished 7th, and this one this weekend. And last year they were both placed in all their 4-star events. So providing they're fit and sound come the end of July, I think I've got a strong chance of going again.
Yes, I guess what happens between now and then? Do you compete in many other events, or are you just waiting for that selection nod and I guess continuing preparation for Rio?
Yeah, well, no, both horses will have a bit of a holiday at the moment. Now they'll have 10 days or a couple of weeks off in the field, let them get over it, and then we'll just plan their program, hopefully have them peaking in August.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously it'll be, I think, your 7th Olympics if you do make it to Rio. What keeps the competitive fires burning after such a long career?
Well, I had a little break in the middle for about 8 years, and then I sort of got reinvigorated, and I still love I love the sport, I love competing, and I still love winning, and so still trying to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I guess Rio also would be quite a unique experience in terms of Olympic equestrian events.
Yes, I mean, at the venue they have held Pan American Games there before, and the modern games never been in South America before, so I've had a little bit to do with Brazil. It's in their winter time there, so the temperatures shouldn't be too hot. It'll be sort of between 20 and 25, I think, which should be ideal. And from what I've heard, the facilities and everything else will be very good.
And obviously, Michael has got to be a hot favourite to take gold, considering his form, and obviously he's just done the triple after his win in badminton. Who do you think are the other medal contenders, and do you think yourself you have a serious chance at a medal in Rio?
I do. Michael Young is obviously a phenomenon at the moment, but I don't think he's unbeatable. We've just got to, produce top performances in all phases. The Germans are definitely the strongest team to beat, although they've lost one of their best horses as well. But, the thing with horses is we're still 100 days out. Anything can happen, and we just hope that we can keep our own horses in top form and get there in good form to do the best we can.
So Mark Todd speaking to Joe Porter, hoping for his 7th Olympics, which would be pretty extraordinary. We're going to go back to Fort Murray to end the program with tonight. That's in Canada, of course. It's hoped changing weather conditions will help firefighters get on top of the wildfire, which has now been burning for a week, 1,600 square kilometres. When we spoke to you on Friday, it was 850, so it's doubled over the weekend. Paul Chapman from Reuters has just sent in this report.
Changing weather conditions have brought new hope for those trying to bring Canada's most destructive wildfire in living memory under control. Cooler weather and light rain stopped the blaze growing as much as they'd feared on Sunday. A change in wind direction took the flames away from the town of Fort McMurray, whose entire population of nearly 90,000 has been evacuated. Alberta Premier Rachel Notley says the situation's improving.
The fire reached approximately 161,000 hectares as of 10:30 a.m. this morning. This is quite a bit smaller than we had feared.
Happy Mother's Day.
Firefighters in the town of Lac La Biche handed out Mother's Day flowers to some of the evacuees who've taken shelter there. In Edmonton, residents have been donating supplies to help out those forced to flee their homes.
It really just makes things so much easier while you're trying to sort everything out and have a million other things going through your mind.
As the wildfire burns into a second week, it looks set to become the costliest natural disaster in Canada's history. Some analysts say the insurance losses could amount to more than $7 billion. It's also halved crude output from the province's oil sands, about 1 million barrels a day.
That report from Reuters got a lovely email to end with tonight. John, re your map story. My mum and I have recently come back from a 7-day trip around Ireland. We were shocked to find the rental car company had run out of road maps and assumed everyone would rent a GPS. We eventually found a good old-fashioned map, and for 7 days we explored the small towns of our ancestors and rural roads through the gorgeous countryside. We bought a pink highlighter and each night marked where we'd been on the map. 1,236 k's later, we'd completed a circle on the map. Now the slightly crumpled map is pinned up on the wall at home. Long live maps. Yes, indeed, Joanne, and long live emails like that and trips like that. Thanks for being with Checkpoint. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The New Zealand First Leader, Winston Peters, says Inland Revenue is not properly equipped to monitor what's going on in the foreign trust sector. The Ngāpuhi leader, Sonny Tau, has admitted trying to shift the blame for killing Kereru onto his son-in-law. A man accused of murdering his ex-girlfriend and her daughter says the victim's new boyfriend carried out the killing. The police are trying to work out how a woman came to be lying on a North Auckland roadside with head injuries. And the Southern District Health Board is being threatened with a legal challenge over its food supply contract by the association representing junior doctors. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm John Greaves. Tonight, a wildfire raging in Western Canada moves towards the province of Saskatchewan. 30